Hi everybody, Jacob here. Uh, so I am a 2015 Teach for America Los Angeles Corps member, and I teach 11th grade English at Charter High School in Northeast Los Angeles, which is a part of the Puck Charter Network. The school is Early College Academy for Leaders and Scholars, otherwise known as ECALS. So I'm going to be walking us through a 3-week unit that I recently just finished, which was started just after Thanksgiving break and finished this week. Uh, the purpose of this unit, which is down here, was for students to write a strong 5-paragraph essay about the importance of education, based on Malcolm X's essay "Learning to Read," Frederick Douglass's essay "Learning to Read and Write," and Richard Rodriguez's essay "Aria: Memoir of a Bilingual Childhood." These are all different essays that all deal with the important theme of education in different ways. The big ideas from this unit are education, race, class, and then thesis statement and the structure of a 5-paragraph essay, because I really have been pushing my students to write more and to develop their writing skills, which they really need to do. The big essential questions for this unit is: why is education important? What are the arguments used by Malcolm X, Frederick Douglass, and Richard Rodriguez to show the importance of education? And how do I structure a 5-paragraph essay based on the arguments made by Malcolm X, Frederick Douglass, and Richard Rodriguez? Down here are some of the common core standards that I aim to hit during this unit. Some of the key ideas and the details, uh, being able to, especially being able to cite strong and thorough textual evidence to support their analysis of what the text is saying. How to structure their writing, their essays, how to integrate knowledge and ideas into their writing, how to read complex texts, and then of course how to write strong arguments and how to write strong essays. That was probably the most important goal for me with this unit. Some of the misconceptions that I had to think about before beginning this unit were that students, a lot of my students still have some questions about how to structure their essays and how to structure thesis statements and topic sentences and how to integrate evidence into their writing and how to explain that evidence. That's things that I've been really trying to push my students to do more of and to develop their skills in doing. So a lot of them still have constant questions about how to do that, how to do that well. I also knew it might be difficult for my students to write about 3 different texts in one essay and understand how to do 1 paragraph for each text. We had 3 different texts, so each of the 3 body paragraphs in their essays had to deal with a different text. So I knew that was something I was going to have to explain to students and get them to understand what they were doing and how to do that well. Some of the prerequisite knowledge that I wanted my students to have before this unit was a basic understanding of the history of race and class in America, which I knew that they would already have a basic understanding of that, as they had recently covered the civil rights movement in their American history class, and we had also done that a little bit in my English class, as we recently read Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail and excerpts from Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. I also wanted them to have a basic understanding of how to structure a 5-paragraph essay, although I was constantly reteaching essay structure throughout the unit. Learning activities I had planned to tap into prerequisite knowledge were group reading activities, think, pair, shares, Socratic seminars, and routine in-class writing activities. Important terms and concepts were race, class, education, immigrant, bilingual, specifically with bilingual education, thesis statement, and the 5-paragraph essay. Writing opportunities were routine journal writing, paragraph writing assignments, peer editing exercises, and the 5-paragraph essay. Again, the text selection for this unit was all nonfiction. It was Learning to Read, an excerpt from Malcolm X's autobiography, Learning to Read and Write, which is excerpted from Frederick Douglass's autobiography, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, and Aria: Memoir of a Bilingual Childhood by Richard Rodriguez. For film supplements, I showed them excerpts from the movie Malcolm X by Spike Lee to get them to see a little bit of the visuals of what Malcolm X was going through and what he was talking about in his autobiography, to help them visualize that a little bit better. And then we also did some Socratic seminars for listening and speaking opportunities, group discussions, and think, pair, shares. The summative assessment that students were building to by the end of the unit was a 5-paragraph essay that answered the following question: what do we believe is the value of being educated? And how does it have the potential to transform the lives of those who are marginalized in our country? The directions that I gave to students were to write a 5-paragraph essay in which you answer the essay prompt with a complex and nuanced argument. I asked them to develop a position on the topic, and I asked them to support their position with at least one quote from Frederick Douglass, at least one quote from Malcolm X, and at least one quote from Richard Rodriguez. So a minimum of 3 quotes. I asked them to avoid merely summarizing, and I wanted them to be blending their quotes with MLA formatting. The formative assessments that I had were paragraph assignments, individual paragraphs, because I wanted them to also be working on paragraph structure in addition to essay structure. Each paragraph I had them do was on a different author, so one paragraph on Malcolm X, one paragraph on Frederick Douglass, and one paragraph on Richard Rodriguez that I then they gave to me for a grade. I edited it, gave back to them, and they used those paragraphs to then build their final 5-paragraph essay. For diagnostic assessments, I had some grammar quizzes because a lot of my students really need to work on some grammar, especially run-on sentences. I gave them 5-paragraph essay graphic organizers, and then I also worked with. I looked back to some of the essays they'd written in previous units, so I could see some of the deficiencies in their writing and what they needed to work on. So down here, I have a calendar for how we went through the unit. So each week we began. So 3 weeks. Each week we began by I began by introducing the text, and then I had students just do a reading strategy where they start off by going through and identifying words that they didn't know in the text. So scanning through the text, identifying unknown words, and then going through and trying to acknowledge their confusion and by looking at some questions, by trying to identify questions that they might have on each page of the new text, and then from there trying to go through and start reading the text, and as they read, being active readers, making margin notes, summarizing the main idea of different passages, and then finally trying to sum up what they think is the main idea of a given passage or a given portion of the text, and then finally going back and identifying important details as a way of supporting what they think is the main idea with evidence. And we would do that. We would usually do that the first 2 days of the week. We would do just reading. I would model doing some reading strategies with them, show them what I meant by finding, important details, show them what I meant by, asking questions on each page and summing up what they think is the main idea. And I would do it. They would do it with me. They would do it on their own in pairs, things like that. Usually about the third day of the week, we would do some sort of debate or Socratic seminar for the Malcolm X text. We had a Socratic seminar, quite a successful Socratic seminar as well, on what they believe is the importance of education, based on Malcolm X's text, Learning to Read. I asked a lot of them if they thought that school wasn't really necessary to obtain an education. Some said yes, some said no, so it was a good discussion. And then the end of the week ended with a formative assessment with them writing their paragraph on Malcolm X, writing a paragraph on what they thought what Malcolm X's view was on education. Again, the second week, same thing. We read Richard Rodriguez's excerpt from his memoir, Aria, Memoir of a Bilingual Childhood. That text is a bit controversial. Mr. Rodriguez came from a Spanish-speaking home, and yet his argument in the text is that bilingual education is bad, and all students should be forced to speak English only in school. So my students, who are almost entirely come from Spanish-speaking homes, had a lot to say about that, and found it to be very interesting. Some disagree. Most of my students, I would say, disagreed with the author, but some agreed with him. So that was interesting. And we again read the text the first 2 days, had a discussion about it, and then they wrote another paragraph on that text. The third week, we did the same sort of thing with our third text by Frederick Douglass called "Learning to Read and Write," which is Mr. Douglass was born a slave and had to teach himself how to read and how to write, and we did the same sort of thing again. And this routine was quite good for students to begin the week each week reading the first 2 days, really digging into the text and identifying main idea and important details, having a discussion about it, and then writing about it. Only this week ended with not only writing their third body paragraph, but by then using all the feedback I'd given them on their previous paragraphs to then write a full 5-paragraph essay about answering the essay prompt and using my feedback to write a full 5-paragraph essay, probably the longest one they'd written all year. So I just want to go through some of the materials to show you some of the materials that my students used. Here we're looking at the essay handout that I gave to my students towards the end, which was, what do we believe is the value of being educated? How does it have the potential to transform the lives of those who are marginalized in our country? I asked them to write 5 or 6 paragraphs answering the topic. So this is just one of the graphic organizers we used for students to dissect the prompt, examples for how they went through and defined their thesis statement, giving their main reasons for their thesis statement, and then down here showing how they went in and divided up their introduction, their body paragraphs, and their conclusion. And down these are some hints that I give to my students about when they're writing. Always write in the present tense. Use lead-ins before each quote. Never use I or you or I believe, things like that. This is an example of one of the graphic organizers I use for paragraph structure. This is very important for me and that they have strong paragraphs. I have them do a topic sentence, explain their topic sentence, give a concrete detailed lead-in or lead into their quotation, have them give their quotation, then explain what that quotation means, why it matters, and then do a second lead-in to a new quotation, another piece of evidence, what it means, why it matters, and a concluding sentence. This is a sample paragraph that I used to show my students a paragraph that I wrote and gave to my students, giving them examples of how I want their paragraphs to look. And then down here is a graphic organizer for how I want their paragraphs to look. This is a graphic organizer that students use when they're reading. This is for them to define words they don't know, ask questions about the different pages, and then some of what they think is the main idea of a text, and then a quote to support what they think is the main idea. These are some of my lesson plans, just day-to-day lesson plans for this unit. Each lesson starts off with a do now, then we extend on their prior knowledge. We do an application where they work on something, usually in groups or in pairs, and then we have some sort of exit ticket at the end of each lesson. This is another paragraph assignment they did after they reread the Richard Rodriguez reading. They wrote a paragraph about whether they thought bilingual education was good or bad for students, and then they took a position on that, and they, again, used this paragraph structure. And this paragraph structure I really wanted to stress to my students, having a good solid paragraph with 2 pieces of evidence. And that is pretty much the crux of this unit. Again, the main goal was them writing their 5-paragraph essay on these 3 different texts and being able to really make a clear argument and defend it. So I was quite pleased with how it turned out, and ended up being very, very, very proud of my students. So. so much.